Doctor Who Season 4, Episodes 9 to 14, titled The Power of the Daleks. Now, this is quite interesting because it's not like the 10th Planet where you have 4 parts and 3 out of the 4 episodes were live action as they were shot back in the 60s with all the sound attacks and all the picture attacks and everything as it was, where you have, William Hurt doing his whole, love, hate, you have no emotions, sir? Like, doing all that kind of stuff. And then the final episode, part 4 of that story, is animated because they have the sound but not the footage because the BBC back then decided to just save money to tape record the entire number of their dramas because they didn't realize, streaming services and home media were going to be a thing back then. And a good chunk of them were second Doctor stories. And looking at what it's become, because I'm looking at the Underworld Menace, I am a little bit like, do I skip the telling naps or not? Do I skip those stories? Maybe, maybe not. But with Power of the Daleks, this is completely animated. This entire story, clearly, the entire story, as it was shot, was wiped out. The first, second Doctor story was completely wiped out of existence. But in 2015, they did a anime recreation. So I'm like, okay, this is neat. And also, let's see how this anime goes. I mean, each anime recreation is very different from the previous, and from each story, so it's going to be a bit different and change. So if I'm not a big fan of this style of animation, the next one might be a one that I might enjoy more in the animated style. And I will say this, I do feel that because the animation is very stilted, like it's very limited with its movement, right? And Patrick Troughton, by the audio alone, you can tell he was a very physical Doctor. He's jumping around all over the place. I do, by the audio alone, I do like his childlike nature, which is clearly, like all those, 4 kind of, as I have heard, 4 has that childlike wonder. 10 has, 11 has, 13 has that childlike, ooh, ah, ee, like this kind of, stuff like, ooh, he's like just talking like to these generals about the Daleks, how evil, how you should not trust them, and Daleks are bad, ooh, fruit. Like he's the child who's have these dangly keys in his face, and it's like, look at the flashing light, look at the fruit, and it's like, I'm like, okay, I like that aspect of things, or how physical he was in his wording about, Polly, Ben, when you saw Dalek, were you amazed? Yes. Were you in awe? Yes. Yeah. Well, these guys ain't, because they know they're around. I like, Troughton's validity and his style Doctor. But I feel like because he clearly he's a very physical Doctor, that because the anime is so stilted, the style of it just doesn't earn itself a little bit. And I think, like, it's in the style of something like Archer, and Archer, that's not my preferred. I am OG Disney Simpsons, boost, the DC anime universe. That type of animation is for me, perfection animation. Not the new style where everything's like Mick and Morty and Archer based stuff. So I was like, okay, this might be this, not in a story wise, but mainly in an animation sense, this might take a little bit while to get used to, which it did. But story wise, it's funny enough, like clearly this came first. But clearly, Victory of the Daleks was very inspired by this one. Because you have the "We are your servants" versus, in Victory of the Daleks, which is the 11th Doctor Matt Smith story, you had, we are your soldiers. We have, would you like some tea? and it's literally the same story in a way, where it's like the Daleks arriving as these good Daleks, and the Doctor's like, what the hell's going on? And talking to the humans and saying, like, no, Daleks are these killing machines. Here's the thing. Trautman, the second Doctor, he doesn't hit the Dalek with a wench and says, and start gloating like, I throw you into the void, I say the whole world's reality, I am the Doctor and you are the Daleks, and kicks them over and starts kicking them over. He doesn't do that. Clearly you don't want some tea. I might have paused a bit because I'm like, this is so deja vu, to the point I had to kind of rewatch that scene. But is essentially that. Is the story of itself is essentially that. You have the first stuff of like how the Daleks are built, and probably the first time fully you have a full sense of the sweet creature that's inside the Dalek itself. Because in the previous stuff, unless it was in the Dalek Master Plan, which is a story that has not have a anime recreation, so it has yet to be brought back to life, because that one's a missing story. But unless that happened, but it's kind of like the first time that we actually fully see the squid that's inside a Dalek. And clearly it was like, bloop, it's there. The mechanics were like, the mechanics of like, it's in the center, it's on here, it's going to open up like this. Back in 1966, it wasn't that type of a thing, a type of, mindset. It's just dumping in the center, this blob thing. And the army of Daleks and that. And I think, like, did I enjoy the story? Yeah, I enjoyed the story. I liked the performances, all that. But I think because it's very similar to Victory of the Daleks, to the point, it's one of those things where you're like, I have already seen this story, and I'm very aware that the story the story that I have been watching right now came first. But I watched the one that came out like 40 years later, and 40, 6 years, 44, years later, and I'm just getting like, seeing this done that. It's that weird thing in your brain where you're like, the newer thing is the old thing is buying a new thing, and you can't have that maybe a level of enjoyment because you have seen the new thing before, and it's like seeing they've done that, but it's like in a weird way. You get what I talk about? Now it opens with the generation, and also because as the classic series did, or I don't know when they stopped, where they kind of show like the last minute of the previous episode, and it starts with the ending of the generation, where the first Doctor turns into a second, and there was kind of this story that kind of felt like it was kind of thrown away, which was the idea of the Doctor not knowing who he is, and the companions not wrapping their brains of the idea of that, like, this man is the same guy. And at the time that was probably the same mindset for a lot of audiences, where like, wait, we saw the first Doctor, for them it's like, for the average goer, that for probably kids that also at the time, it was, that's not Doctor Who. Doctor Who's this other guy. Who the fuck is this guy? And and so Polly and Ben are saying the same things. Polly is like, oh, that's the Doctor, and Ben's like, no, the Doctor is, going and wagging his finger around like that's not that's not the guy that we've been traveling with for all these years, or over this time, X amount of time. and I liking this. I liking this, and even though it was very like that was where I'm like, yeah, this animation might get a little bit stilted. It happens right at the beginning. It might be its enemy. With the story and maybe the enjoyment of it. But I like. I really do like the concept of like the Doctor doesn't know who he is, and he's like, the Doctor, who's that? No, that's not the Doctor. I'm not the Doctor. Like, he knows who the Doctor is, but he doesn't think he is the Doctor. I like that. I like all that type of stuff. But then it kind of feels abandoned in a way. It feels like, yeah, I'm the Doctor, and and the companion's like, yeah, you're the Doctor as well. It just felt like kind of got abandoned because then the Dalek comes around. And the Daleks have their big plan, and it's like, yeah, look, we can just follow this story, this Doctor B plot, this Generation B plot, its way. But but here's the thing: did I enjoy the story? Yeah, I liked it, but it did feel being there, done that. The next one, if it's not the Underwater Menace, because of the teleport, because the telenap is just a slideshow. 2 out of the 4 episodes of that story is a slideshow, with audio there, because they have screenshots. Screenshots are available, but not the actual story itself. Not the actual footage itself, the screenshots. Guys, should I cover it? Or do I just jump to the moon base? And apparently, yeah. And that's like kind of like, half and half, like 2 out of the 4 episodes on the moon base is going to be animated. So you know what, guys? I do want to cover the Underwater Menace, but because of the telenap, I'm worried that I'm going to treat this more like an audio drama, than an actual television episode and a show and all that. So I might, maybe Disney will bring back the animated recreations, and we can. Yeah, I can cover the Underwater Menace, but honestly, next one will be the moon base. I just think any time there's a teleport on there, I think a telenap, I think that's when we just jump ahead. I know that's not fair. I know that's not what should happen, but next one will be the moon base. So, and by looking of the description on Prime, we have we've been talking about the Dalek story. Now it's